tonight's comes from Tom. There is an almost impossible accent for me to do in this, but I'm just going to brazen it. Maybe you won't even notice. It'll be that good.
Okay.
A few years ago, says Tom, I was working part-time as a volunteer special police constable, which gave me the freedom to pursue my acting career as a film and TV extra. Whilst completing the online application form to join the extras agency, I was asked what uniforms I had in position and what special skills I had. Well, as well as a police uniform, I remembered my parents had my great-uncle's World War II RAF uniform and Grandad's military uniform in the loft. So I ticked the relevant boxes and scrolled down to the special skills bit. Do you have firearms training, it said. Well, technically I did, as pepper spray in the UK is classed as a firearm, so I ticked that box as well. About a year later, I received an email looking for men with military experience for a war film called Monuments Men. When I looked up the film online, I saw it had big names in it. George Clooney, Matt Damon, Bill Murray, John Goodman, to name but a few. I wrote back to my agency as quick as I could, at the same time thinking, how hard could the role of a military extra be? Bit of marching around, standing to attention, that's going to be straightforward. Right? Wrong. The filming day came around, and no sooner had I arrived than I was quickly whisked off to costume and makeup to be transformed into a German soldier. Each of us were handed fake rifles and heavy equipment belts, and then pointed towards an area with thick trees and thick bushes on one side and a grass road-like clearing on the other. John Goodman was wandering around reciting his lines out loud when suddenly, literally out of nowhere, George Clooney appeared in front of me. He looked me up and down and energetically shouted, well, it's just with his standard American, okay? It's just standard American voice. Say, I hope you're ready and psyched up for this scene. You look fantastic.
It's like James Stewart was there. Just like James Stewart.
Well, standard American actor. Fits. Anyway, George will appear again in a moment. Of course, I said, but in fact I had absolutely no idea what was expected of me. A few minutes later, a film crew member came up to us and asked us all to get in line to collect a weapon for the scene. And for my sins, I was handed an MG42 tripod machine gun. Have you ever used one of these before? I was asked. And of course I said, yes. I was in too deep to say anything else. Anyway, I carried this very heavy piece of equipment into the bushes and was directed to set it up near the clearing where the scene was being filmed. Luckily, the gun required a second person to feed the bullets as it fired, and my saviour was a guy called Dave. Dave and I set the gun up together, him doing most of the work because, unlike me, he actually knew what he was doing. Dave obviously sensed my fear because he immediately said, "You've never used one of these before, have you?" Not recently, I replied defensively. Dave sighed and said, "Do you want to feed the bullets through and I'll operate the gun?" So I nodded sheepishly, and Dave gave me a quick lesson on how to hold the bullets and the importance of keeping them straight. Whatever you do, he says, do not jam the gun. Keep the bullet chain straight. That was his instruction. Then George Clooney appeared again. Oh, great. And George, I should mention, was also directing the film. He stood in front of the bush, which by that time was filled with around 15 soldiers, all holding their guns ready for the scene to start. But when he spoke this time, he wasn't quite as jovial. All right. Say, listen up, everybody. There are over $1 million of pyrotechnics about to go strapped to them trees and them bushes around you. He comes from Texas. You have one chance to get this scene right. Do not mess this up. What do you think? Close? I could be doing an espresso ad next. Anyway, before I had a chance, anyway, we realised that there's $1 million of pyrotechnics about to go off, so we couldn't mess up. Before I had the chance to be even more afraid, he shouted, "Rolling! Silence! Action!" And the scene had started. The trees, the bushes, the ground, they all came alive with deafening sounds of explosions and gunfire. Dave was turning the gun in all directions, and the noise and the force of the gun nearly threw me to the floor. I was desperately trying to keep the chain of bullets at 90 degrees to the gun as Dave frantically rotated it in all directions. A US military truck came hurtling around the corner as a shower of paintballs, the clever substitute for actual bullets, came flying towards us all in all directions. Then one of the pellets hit my wrist, throwing my hand away from the tight grip of the bullet chain and in turn instantly jamming the gun. "Cut!" shouts a very cross George Clooney. I'm actually sounding more like him now.
Definitely, yeah.
The gunfire stopped, paintballs stopped, a very expensive pyrotechnics fizzled out. I had actually blown it. I had literally ruined the scene, but my wrist did hurt an awful lot. I looked over at Dave, my wrist throbbing, my heart beating at 100 miles an hour. Was that my fault? I said weedily. Dave said nothing, just shook his head in disappointment, like your parents do when you've done something wrong. We were quickly ushered together in silence, piled into the minibus, back to the sign-out tent, and then into the car back home. What a loser. One film, $1 million over budget. Father Simon, I asked forgiveness from the film crew and especially George Clooney for ruining a very expensive scene. Also to Dave, who was partnered with such an inexperienced person, had no idea what he was doing. And to my acting agency, who had every faith that I had the right experience for the role. The film didn't really do very well at the box office, and I can't help feeling that George, Bill and co. might wish to blame me for it, for being unforgivably rubbish in The Line of Duty. Best thing about Monuments Men was when half the cast appeared on Graham Norton. It was one of my favourite ever episodes of Graham Norton because they had consumed so much wine that it was completely hilarious all the way through. It was absolutely wonderful. Anyway, let's go with Jo to see if she's feeling very forgiving towards Tom.
Well, this is rather a cliffhanger, don't you think? Because you kind of want to know what happened next. Really, what did they have to... I presume they didn't reshoot the whole thing. How did they edit around it?
I don't know. Unless George was actually lying, it can't have been $1 million of pyrotechnics, can it?
But it was.
Right.
He's got quite a lot of money, a lot of coffee adverts and all that. No, I mean, this just shows that, deceit never works. It's never worth it. But, so he should never have gone into this. He should never have kind of pretended that he actually had any military experience in the first place because he just ruined the whole film. And, if you do anything to upset George Clooney, that is not allowed.
All right, that's the unforgivable sin.
I just love George.
I'm torn between two things because first of all, no, you shouldn't really lie where it comes to kind of special skills with guns and things. So, I mean, look, there's many supporting artists and they are brilliant. Can I just say, the film industry gets by on brilliant supporting artists. They are the grouting. They're the ones that don't get fed until the end. They're the ones that freeze all day. So, a big shout out for them generally. But what were your ADs doing? Were your assistant directors? Why weren't they helping setting you all up properly? Because it seems like a bit of I don't know, it seems a bit ramshackle. But you did lie about your special skills. And I think at this time, you can't be forgiven because you shouldn't lie about things like that. It's too serious.